I have a question about Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, when he tells Cyrus, I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. I was confused. I didn't know there's a God of creating evil. Did you answer my question? Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, well, this is a good question. It's one we say, how can we attribute this to God? Pastor Glaze, start us off.
Well, first of all, I would say that we know for a fact that God is not the author of evil. Several scriptures, Habakkuk 1:13, 2 Timothy 2:13, Titus 1:2, James 1:13. But let me read 1 John 1:5. It says, this then is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light and in him is no darkness or evil at all. So we know that God is not the creator of evil. If we go back and we look at the Hebrew word used for evil there, the word is ra, and it actually means calamity. And so, where God says, I create calamity, we can see how that fits into, who God is. Because if we look at, I always like to use the example of Jonah. When Jonah was running from God, the Bible says that a storm came up. But if you go back and look at the Hebrew, it said that God created a storm. And, I kind of picture, you see this running prophet and God is up in heaven and he's like kind of forming this storm in his hand. And he says, hey, there goes Jonah. and he throws it at the boat where, where Jonah's at. And so, from that sense, God creates calamity. But, he didn't, God is not the author of evil.
Right. Good interpretation of that. It's interesting that they use evil, and a lot of Bibles still use evil there. Any other thoughts, Ray?
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Glaze. I think the word includes moral evil. It is used in passages that have moral evil, but the calamity is what we understand in verses like that, and there are a lot of verses like that. If a trumpet is blown in the city, Amos 3:6, will not the people be afraid? If there is evil in a city, will not the Lord have done it? And it's just, again, speaking to the fact that God is sovereign. And what we would call evil, my spouse dying, me getting cancer, oh, wow, that's great evil. Well, that's really not moral evil if God allows that to happen and even ordains that in my life, because I actually deserve to die as a sinner. So, God hasn't done me wrong. And I think you see that really clearly in Job, when Job's wife says to him, curse God and die. All this stuff has happened to you, and she knew God was sovereign, and that ultimately God was letting that happen. But Job said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. Should we indeed accept good from the Lord, and shall we not accept evil? And again, it's not that God did evil in allowing Satan to do those things. God had a good purpose in mind. But what happened to Job was evil. So, I am the Lord. I make peace. I create evil. Things that really are evil in this world, God's ultimately in charge. So yes, he is, but he does not author any moral evil. He has no moral desire for evil or anything like that. His purpose is always good, even in our deaths. The saints die in the Lord, and it's for our good. So, that's what it means. It means that what we see as evil, God's still in charge of that, but God hasn't done wrong.
Yeah. Anything to add there?
Real short that I would say to that is God didn't create evil. Evil is the product of our choice. Satan had to make a choice. Moral, like you said, moral evil. God didn't create any of that. It was our decision making that brought about that evil. But to these gentlemen's point, I believe that even though those evil things, quote unquote, happen, God uses them in his ability to be able to work out a perfect divine will.